making sure maybe.
Yeah, it looks like she's just coming on. That's great.
Megan, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
All right, we're recording?
We're recording.
Very good. Welcome everybody to tonight's City of Tumwater Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. The meeting is called to order and I'll do roll call. Commissioner Edwards. Here. Commissioner Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Commissioner Schumacher.
Here.
Vice Chair Sullivan.
Here.
Great. Commissioner Tobias.
Here.
Commissioner Barella will be a bit late, and Commissioner Von Holtz is excused tonight, and me, Commissioner Robbins. So we have a quorum, so let's get going. The only change to the agenda that I know about is that we don't yet have our minutes from the last few meetings available yet, so we'll skip that. But does anybody else have any other changes they want to suggest? All righty. Okay. Let's go to commissioners' reports, if any. Anybody want to chime in on things you've been doing or seeing?
Broke ground on the 5-story apartment complex over on Pioneer Drive.
That's right. Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Cool. Glad you noticed that. Anybody else? Okey doke. Brad, manager's report.
Just to let everybody know, for your next meeting will be a joint briefing with the tree board. We'll be starting discussions about the tree and vegetation preservation code. Staff is still working through the actual code language, so what we'll be presenting is sort of an introduction to all the concepts that will be part of the plan. So the language itself, the proposed code language may change slightly for the version you'll see in June. But we've got a good flavor of all the things that we've done to start the discussion. We're probably also going to be we're going to be adding a couple more meetings, I think, for the tree and vegetation code, just because it was hot. So we'll be laying out at that meeting sort of the discussion topics that we'll cover at each of the meetings. But that won't affect the other updates for the landscaping and the street treatment. Those are still on track.
Okay. When you say adding meetings, does that mean working that topic into the existing schedule, every 2 weeks, or are we interdigitating some?
Yeah, we'll be doing all three at once. We'll be expanding the number of meetings that we deal with the tree and vegetation stuff.
Okay. Within the current
schedule.
Very
We're not
good.
going to add additional meetings. Because number one is summer, and number two, I don't want to lose all the play.
That's right. Okay. Okay. Very good. Erica, did you want to say anything?
Nope.
Brad, did you hear from anybody, or do we have anybody online? We have Mr. Chuanyo from the Jolt News. Would you like to address the Planning Commission, Mr. Chuanyo?
Hello, good evening. Jerome from the Jolt News. Don't really have a comment. So yeah, thank you.
Great, glad you're here. Thank you. And I'll just note that Commissioner Varela has joined us on Zoom, so glad you made it.
Thank you.
Brad, I think we're ready to get to the heart of the meeting.
Let me bring up the presentation on the big screen. And, I will walk you through as we go. So.
Yep.
With you.
All right. So I'm Erica Smith Erickson. Tonight I'm going to be presenting the City of Tumwater's SEPA categorical exemption update proposal. This is in support of our housing action plan, which Brad presented earlier this month. Since 2018, the city has undertaken many actions to address homelessness and support affordable housing. In 2021, the City Council adopted the Tumwater Housing Action Plan, and within that plan, Strategy 3 was to expand the overall housing supply by making it easier to build all types of housing projects. Section 3C of the Housing Action Plan states we are to maximize the use of SEPA categorical exemptions for residential and infill development. And in 2022, the state amended the SEPA categorical exemptions. That includes minor construction related to residential and multifamily development. The exemptions also include agricultural buildings and some small-scale non-residential use buildings, which we'll go into detail later in the presentation. In 1971, the state adopted SEPA. It was the state's fundamental environmental law. It was intended to maintain and improve environmental quality, and it was implemented through extensive procedural requirements to ensure the city gave proper consideration to environmental matters in making decisions on development actions. So that includes public notice, public comment periods, to make sure that we were following state requirements. In 1984, the ordinance, we passed an ordinance establishing the city's SEPA categorical exemptions. And since 1984, the city has improved the protection of environmental resources and mitigation of impacts through a variety of regulations. The regulations include our critical area regulations, floodplain regulations, the Shoreline Master Program, transportation impact fees, concurrency, and more. So this was to make sure we were, again, protecting, making sure we were protecting environmental concerns through our code if we were exempting projects from SEPA.
Do you have a question, Commissioner Tobias?
That's a quick question for Brad. Do we have, what areas in Tumwater would be considered floodplains? Do we have any? Are they?
So along the Deschutes, especially say around the golf course and Pioneer Park, then Percival Creek and the lakes that are in that associated with floodplains.
That's what I was thinking, but I didn't know for certain if they fell under that definition. Sorry.
No, totally fine. And then in 2012, the state amended the WAC to include flexible categorical exemption levels for local agencies to raise their exemption levels for minor new construction. In 2017, we raised the SEPA categorical exemptions and increased the scope of public notification requirements under the notice of application process. So what that means is for these exempt projects, if we were going to raise the exemption levels, we were going to basically lower the NOA or change the notice of application requirements. So we are still notifying different jurisdictions, the tribes, and other agencies. In 2019, we increased the SEPA categorical exemptions for multifamily dwellings from 25 units to 60 units. So that means up to 60 units didn't have to go through the SEPA process, but they still had to follow the notice of application requirements.
So, the notice of application, that's a process, that's a separate. Somebody wants in to build a single-family home, that doesn't require SEPA or notice of application. So that's way under. And then, so at a certain point, you reach a notice of application threshold.
Yep, and
Which is different than a SEPA threshold.
yes, and we actually have a slide with a chart coming up so you can see what the thresholds are. Notice of application is, I think it's an application notice that we send to other agencies, the tribes, and
We have a large interested party.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
It just means it doesn't have to go through SEPA, which has a more structured time frame, notice of application, public comment period, and then a determination of significance.
The notice of application process, is that a requirement under the Growth Management Act or SEPA, or is that just us being nice, letting people know?
It's a bit of both. We're, I think, obligated under, not necessarily the GMA, but some of the follow-on legislation to let people know.
proactively, not just
Proactively let people know.
put it there after I send it out, okay.
One of the big reasons why we really tried, when we adjusted SEPA at this point has become more procedure than actual dealing with mitigation, because we have all these other regulations now.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons we're looking at reducing the number of times we use it, because we don't do anything, for the most part.
Sure.
But but our mayor, our previous mayor, was very insistent that if we made any changes to public notice, that all those people who are getting notice of the projects would see the process. Once we raise those levels, we gotta make sure those people are still told what's gonna happen, so they're aware. And so that's why we lowered the notice of application process, so we make sure that everybody still got notice of it and still could participate in the process.
Yeah, and I'm, I'm on that list, and I love it, I think it's great, I just kind of curious how all that worked out, so thank you, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're totally fine. Also, it's part of the state requirements. If you raise exemption levels, you have to ensure that there's ample public notice.
Before you go on, and maybe you're gonna get to this in a little bit, but in the roughly 10 years since since about 2012, when the city began changing the exemption thresholds, increasing them, have we observed, do we have data about the kinds and size of applications that have come in for development and that are, kind of maybe just skirting under the thresholds, kind of sequentially, and therefore, what I'm worried about is kind of, the death of 1,000 cuts kind of a thing, where things come in under thresholds, so they're not really given the full scrutiny and public opportunity that the larger kinds of developments would get. Are we seeing that compared to
No,
prior
and
to those?
That's really the reason we changed the notice of application thresholds, to capture all those things that we were losing through the SEPA process. So we haven't seen any fall off in terms of the notices and what the thresholds are in terms of applications. So when you raise the SEPA level, people are still being told about that gap, all
Okay.
the projects in that.
Okay.
And we're not really seeing a dramatic change in, say, the public response. And we've been receiving previously, it's been about the same. But I'm sure if we stopped doing that and, not noticed everybody, we would hear about it.
Okay.
So that's important.
And I think that's an important thing to talk about, that nobody's losing ground on that. And then, in terms of protecting the environment, whether, natural or built, how are things going there? What are we seeing?
So, as far as environmental protection, that's why we have updated our code, so our critical area ordinance, our shoreline master program, to capture all that. I think right now, currently, projects that are in critical areas aren't exempt from SEPA, at least in the SEPA exemption that we're talking about. So if there was critical areas, they would not be SEPA exempt.
In the staff report, we probably also provided a table. The SEPA has 15 different chapters. In the checklist that each thing is supposed to address, from water, air, historical, land use, housing, all those impacts. And in the table, we describe, okay, here are the 15 SEPA categories. Here are all the codes that now cover what had previously been only SEPA. And so in 1971, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're in a position that we're covering almost all of the things. Now we are covering all of the things, including.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of a follow-on, hate to slow you down here, but kind of as a follow-on, kind of in this theme of, what has been our experience that we've observed with the process. Have we seen, I'll call it kind of greater efficiencies that allow for more affordable housing improve in that period?
We need to go back and actually run the numbers, I think, but I would say probably yes.
Okay.
The issue was the SEPA process by itself could typically add a month to a month and a half on its own in terms of noticing requirements. So that could be factored in.
I think that would be an important part of the story too, is that trend, that because the city has taken these actions to make our code work better and more efficiently, for multiple goals, environmental protection, development that's fair, and so on, that's what, you know, it's working, or, you know, room for improvement or whatever. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm done. Keep going.
All right. So in 2022, state legislature adopted State Senate Bill 5818, which allowed for an increase in SEPA categorical exemption levels for residential development. And that's why we are proposing to update our code, is based off of that Senate bill. And next, since 2013, outside of specific transportation impacts, SEPA review is more of a procedural process rather than a primary means to mitigate environmental impacts. So kind of what we were talking about earlier, it's more for noticing requirements and transportation impact fees, which we talked about in our last meeting, the concurrency. Right now, how we collect concurrency is through SEPA mitigation. So if you look at the chart here, in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, most likely all of those were for traffic mitigation.
For very specific mitigation. We do collect impact fees, and we do run concurrency, but they're separate from the SEPA process. There's one particular instance in the city where we collect mitigation fees based on SEPA for transportation impacts, and that's for the Tumwater Boulevard interchange with I-5. Because that interchange is failing or almost failed, almost any project that sends a trip through there, we've been assigning, you pay a certain amount towards the mitigation of what you're doing. That's the reason for the uptick of the MD&S's since 2019 or 20.
And then to kind of go over this chart, determination of non-significance, it means a proposal is unlikely to have significant adverse environmental impacts. Mitigated determination of non-significance, mitigated determination of non-significance is in lieu of preparing an environmental impact statement when there is an assurance that specific enforceable mitigation will successfully reduce impacts to a non-significant level. So in this instance, that would go along with concurrency and traffic. We collect that fee, and that goes towards improving interstate, the interchanges, correct? Yeah. Okay. Our proposed amendments within the code, this is where we go into the notice of application. This is Tumwater Municipal Code 1406030. I'm proposing to include a table for notice of application thresholds. So here, it kind of goes over for single family dwellings. So if someone is doing a short plot under 4 units, no notification is required. If they're proposing 5 to 30 single family residences, the notice of application would be sent. Over 30 units, that's when that would trigger SEPA.
This is the maximum proposal allowed in the state. Pretty close to what we probably need. Our current, for example, single family dwellings, our current SEPA threshold limit is 9, and that's also tied to the upper limit of what a short plat is. If you go to 10, it becomes a full, plat process, which itself is another.
Mr. Tobias.
So when you say for the NOAA and SEPA required for like over 30 units of single-family development, is that sort of like track housing of if you have a sort of a undeveloped area that you then add like a new neighborhood development there? that you would need the SEPA determination for? I'm trying to think of a good example, thinking like the Bush Hills area or like out there, you know, where you get a,
Susan Lake Estates, for example, the two developments on Henderson that are currently under construction, those would probably be examples. Those two are under three, but above 9 right now.
okay.
It may be kind of related to that. I'm kind of puzzling. Is it units per parcel, units per application,
Per development.
per development? So whatever its size, you know, okay.
Okay, and if we go to the next slide, right now, so this is showing our current SEPA categorical exemptions and then the maximum allowed under state law that was just passed. So we would be proposing to match the state's maximum. So our single-family dwellings would go from 9 to 30. And something that was proposed through the new state law was introducing single-family residential units under 1,500 square feet. So that means single-family homes, but they have a size limit of 1,500 square feet. They could build up to 100 units or 100 lots with those size of residences on them. So that's something we don't have in our code yet, and that's new. For multifamily, so multifamily is more than one residential unit. So I think that includes townhouses, duplexes, or no, sorry, triplexes and apartment buildings. We also have agricultural structures. It would be proposed to go from 20 to 40,000. Our office, school, commercial, recreation, service, storage buildings, and associated parking structures. That would go up by 20,000 square feet and 60 more parking spaces. With the new state thresholds, they're actually removing parking lots. In our current code, we have a specific exemption for parking spaces. That's going to be removed. And for landfill and excavation, our current limit to be SEPA exempt is 250 cubic yards, and we're proposing to go to 1,000 cubic yards.
An explanation of how the categories kick in. So if I'm doing this particular example, a 36-unit preliminary plat for single-family dwellings, I would be qualified. I need to go for SEPA under the first row there, you see. Even if my landfill and excavation amount may be less than 1,000 cubic yards, the single-family dwelling category trumps the other one. So if I'm under that threshold and over the landfill, I'm still exempt because the primary thing I'm doing is building houses, not moving dirt.
Conversely, if you're only building 8 houses, and yet you have to move 1,200 cubic yards, you're still going to be doing a SEPA.
You'll still be exempt because your primary thing
Oh,
is
you'll still be
building houses. You're building houses, so that's your first thing you look at. If you just say, I'm just gonna move dirt, which we actually don't allow in the city without an actual project, that's when that last line would kick in. So,
Commissioner Edwards.
And this might be out of our knowledge area a little bit, but do we have an idea of how the state came up with those maximums? Was there like a study done? Was there anything to kind of get them where they did? And it's a pretty drastic change from what it currently was.
I think the summary is political process. That's how the numbers were arrived at, and we're just starting that. We'll see more of that coming out of this current session. To be really honest, I'm not sure where they came up with the numbers, because there's not a magical number I'm aware of that says that at 30 detached units in a preliminary plat, you have something as a SEPA impact, but you can build up to 100 multifamily dwellings and 99 multifamily not have a SEPA. So I think it really is we see the legislature saw, well, we need to build more multifamily, let's make it easier, that kind of thing.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Kirkpatrick.
Going back to our definitions again, is a duplex a single-family attached unit, or is it a multi-family dwelling?
Oh, sorry for the confusion there. I do believe it is a single-family dwelling. It's still considered a single-family dwelling. Wait, let's look that up.
So detached doesn't really mean anything there.
Well, my answer would be, I think we need to look for that. My gut says, I think it's single-family dwelling says in single-family detached, or townhouses that are attached, single-family individual units. When you start to get in, the state definitions vary from ours, and I think they think multifamily includes duplexes, but we need to do more research and figure out that's actually the case.
Can follow up with you on that one.
We've lost the meaning of family long ago, so.
The legislature removed single-family from our.
And except for the one, single family, under 1,500 square feet units, everything else could be any size. Right?
Are you talking about for single-family dwellings?
For multifamily, or, I mean, there could be, like 30 units that are like 10,000 square feet, a whole community of giant houses. That's giant to me, sorry, maybe it's not to others. Okay.
Yeah,
So it seems like those would cover more ground. I mean, unless they're, multi-level and the footprint is smaller.
there are other regulations in our zoning code, though, that go over like total lot, so lot size, lot coverage limits. I think that would come into play when we're looking at residential, like size of the actual residence. The state didn't provide a maximum with that State Senate Bill 5818. But I could look into that more and get back to you. I think we would have to take a look at what the zoning is, the platting, the subdivision process, and what the standards are for those.
I'd be curious, it just seems like, you start to lose an ability to manage it when you don't specify. Commissioner Tobias.
This may be a bit more of an out there question, but what does a single-family residential unit under 1,500 square feet look like? Is that like a single wide trailer? Is that it's even smaller, or?
I would say 1,500 square feet would be something that was built season before.
Something like a one to two bedroom?
For example, the first house I bought in Tacoma was 1,300 square feet and 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. So, and 2 stories. So it's still a pretty substantial size house. It's not a micro house, it's not an accessory dwelling.
So it's more like it's still a full-sized house, quote unquote, but on a smaller footprint, is sort of what you're thinking with a 1,500 square foot.
It was something that was, if you built it in the 50s and 60s, you were high class. Because that was the standard at the time. Currently, for example, this year, when we looked at all the building permits we issued last year for single family, we issued about 79, final 79 building permits for single family. Out of those 79, probably 75 were over 2,000 square feet, and maybe 3 or 4 would even come close to the 1,500.
This is the steep incentivization basically is to, enable more development of smaller housing, smaller footprint housing, as it were.
So the east side of Tumwater Hill and Caroline neighborhoods are probably good examples of housing that's closer to this or at that level than the new stuff that's being built.
Yes, my house is 1,200 square feet and it's 3 bed, 2 baths, right by SBSCC, so.
Yeah, we had our first house was 1,000 square feet, 3 bed, 1 bath.
Mhm. I'm wondering, is there a reason why from agricultural kind of down, what's the relation to affordable housing, I guess, on those, if any?
For our purposes, not really, but
Okay.
if we're gonna open up SEPA, we'll consider and discuss those things like that.
Okay.
The ag building stuff is probably not something we're gonna deal with. We have to put it into our code, but we don't permit that large of a scale of ag buildings to begin with. We just don't have the space. So that probably is not applicable. The one that really is applicable is the commercial, covers institutional, industrial, and commercial buildings. So that square footage and that level of parking, probably further discussions are different.
And the legislature didn't make a category for mixed-use type things.
No, this is actually the same structure that was in SEPA in 1971. So they haven't changed the basic structure. They just keep tweaking and adding on stuff to it. Or in the particular case of individual parking lots, taking off parking lots by themselves. You just build a parking lot on a parcel, you won't have to be SEPA.
Looking online, has anybody got a hand raised? Oh, okay, go ahead. Nope, we're good.
All right, and then we're also proposing to amend Tumwater Municipal Code 1548 as needed to address SEPA categorically exempt projects and the traffic concurrency requirements. So again, this is about the traffic mitigation fee, which is different than a traffic impact fee. So right now, as Brad was saying, any project that generates a trip to the Tumwater Boulevard I-5 interchange area, we are collecting mitigation through SEPA, through that. So we might need to amend that portion of the code depending on, well, staff are still working together about that to see if there's a solution, how we can still get those mitigation fees without needing SEPA.
Really more complicated.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around a little bit. The mitigation is a mitigation of impact.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, so traffic concurrency is to ensure that the city's level of transportation service standards are achieved with development proposals. Projects that are shown to degrade the level of service below indicated level of service required shall be subject to the mitigation, the appropriate mitigation. It could also be, I believe, street improvements, so they have the option to do the improvements or they pay the mitigation fee.
Typically, unless, of course, we're trying to, we have a larger project that we anticipate in that area.
Okay. And as part of that, there's sort of a time component where you anticipate that level of service to hold for some period of time after you've mitigated impacts and got your basic infrastructure in to satisfy the development. Is there a time component?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but it is established through our comprehensive plan update. I believe the transportation department establishes what interchange areas are going to require concurrency or that might need updated in the future. I think that's what we established through the comp plan update.
Yeah, so the transportation plan of comprehensive establishes, values for individual interchanges.
The level of service.
Level of service, thank you.
Yeah.
Remember, level of service is established in the comprehensive plan, for all the major interchanges in the city. And then traffic concurrency basically is the process by which an applicant comes in, proposes something, and then our transportation manager evaluates the proposal against all the other projects that are in the queue, against what, the standard is. So if it goes below, if you say that the level of service should be C, and you drop, project costs down to D, then they trigger
They have to do
requirements
something.
to upgrade it.
Yeah.
Either by paying into something like, say, put a light in instead of a stop sign, or add a lane or something.
And then that's supposed to last for, 20 years, 30 years, barring any other
I
development.
don't think there's a timeline on it, and I think,
But I guess what I'm,
especially right now in our area, we're gonna see lots of rapid
yeah,
changes.
yeah,
So I think we have, our limits for when we collect fees for particular projects, when we have to turn around and use the fees within.
Right.
It's a 5-year period.
right.
And then we'll check that.
5 or 6 years, yeah. I guess what I'm kind of concerned about again is, that sort of, a development comes in and maybe it doesn't, drop the level of service down, they're good, didn't have to do much. Here comes another one next door, it's starting to look, not so good, and then, maybe they have to do something now, and it builds, there's a good word for it that escapes me right now, where it accumulates, cumulative effect of a lot of smaller kinds of things that, we got to the end of things and suddenly our infrastructure isn't working like we thought it was back when we created the framework for it.
Right. And I think that's why we made some changes last year, actually, through the housekeeping amendments to address the really small project effects, particular things that we hadn't been really capturing before, because I think our concurrency stopped at field traffic study. If you had 50 or less trips, you were done. You didn't have to go on with the process to do find those trips anywhere. Well, we're discovering that we have a ton of small projects coming through the Tumwater Boulevard interchange, and so each one of those projects is contributing something towards it, but maybe not a huge part of it. But we need to account for that. So that's the tweak we made last year when we made the changes. to
Right.
50.
Okay.
Right. Am I switching the slide? Yeah, not a problem. All right. So the proposed amendments are intended to eliminate duplicative environmental reviews. Our code is up to date and current. We are capturing environmental standards through our municipal code. It's also to reduce project review timeframes with SEPA, that notice of application, the comment period, completeness review. It does add time to project review timelines. We also want to ensure that there is proper notice and comment opportunities if we do raise our exemption levels, which is why we are keeping the minimum notice of application thresholds that we have in our current code. We are not raising the notice of application thresholds. We also want to increase affordability of housing within the city. We're still reviewing how the proposed SEPA categorical exemption amendments relate to traffic concurrency and potential mitigation. Public notification process. This month to May, hopefully, we expect to complete the public draft of the ordinance. We need to finalize what sections of code we will be amending. So still working with that concurrency section of code. Then we will send the required 60-day notice to the affected tribes, agencies with expertise, the jurisdictions, Department of Ecology, and the public. We also will send the amendments to Washington State Department of Transportation, And then we will complete the SEPA non-project review process. And then start the required 60-day notice of intent process. Do you have any questions on that?
This is an update. As we're making changes to the SEPA code, there are actually specific notice requirements built into the SEPA state law that require us to do above and beyond what we typically do for code changes and notices. So that's why the 60 days to notice to the tribe, new notice to WashDOT if we're making changes to the SEPA things all come into play. It also means that we're going to be delaying the next steps in the process because of the notice requirements. It's just going to take us longer.
Okay.
All right. So our next meeting on the SEPA update will be May 23rd. That's going to be a work session. And then we hope to have the public hearing on June 17th. Then we'll have the General Government Committee briefing July 12th, the work session July 25th, and the consent agenda July 31st.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Schumacher.
I just wanted to say that I am in great favor of anything we can do to make it more efficient and simplify, while still keeping, you know, protections in place and public notification in place and so forth. It's good governance. It's good governance to streamline and simplify whenever possible. Anyway, so good job.
Do you have any other comments, questions?
Commissioner Tobias.
So you've spoken about the advantages to, and Commissioner Schumacher, you know, about the efficiencies that will come from these changes. Do you anticipate any pushback or any hesitancy on the part of any like public stakeholders or any folks that might take issue with something that could be construed as an environmental rollback of any kind? Or have you heard any comments to that effect yet? Or?
Based on the changes we made in 2017 and 19, the only issues that we had were just making sure that we provided adequate protections for historical and cultural resources. That was a huge issue for the tribe, huge issue for Department of Historic Preservation at the state level. Aside from that, we didn't hear any pushback.
Okay. Good. Great. So we'll take this up again in, forgot, it was May 23rd or something.
Yep, May 23rd.
Hopefully we'll have a resolution on how to deal with that.
Okay. Sounds good. Good. Any other questions, comments?
If anything comes up, you can always email me.
Patrick, the SEPA code doesn't define single family or multifamily. So I think my interpretation would be the SEPA code calls out detached and attached single family, which would be like a single family house, subdivision that doesn't have common walls, or a townhouse that has common walls but are under different owners. So in my interpretation, that would be, all those things would fall under this single family under in SEPA. Duplexes, triplexes, and quads would fall under the multifamily. The shared, and a portion of those is likely to be rented.
That sounded very clear until you get to the last column that talks about that they're detached. Because they aren't detached, they're attached.
Yeah.
So that's the counter that we end up with.
I'd like to, when we take this up in May for our work session, I wonder if it's possible to have, a map of the city present with our zones and, any, you know, we can talk about, you know, which areas are most affected, where are we trying to, for example, really increase the density and that kind of thing. Where do we anticipate, you know, most of the development occurring, where we, you know, so we can maybe help picture it better.
We can definitely do that. We'll do that as part of the outline.
All right, I guess if there's not any other remarks or questions. Oh, was that a,
Nope.
okay. Or Erica, did you have more? Are you?
Nope. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I always have a lot of good questions too, so. All right, well, if that's the case, our, next meeting date, as Brad, mentioned earlier, is May 9th, joint meeting with the tree board. And after that, entertaining a motion for adjournment.
I'll move that we adjourn.
That was Commissioner Edwards.
Second.
Right, that was Commissioner Schumacher, okay. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn tonight. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good deal, we're, getting out early here. Okay, motion passes, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.